I don't know why I don't talk. Okay. Hey, welcome. We're going to go ahead and ground ourselves in our greatness because that's pretty much how we start every single day. And by pretty much, I mean it is how we start every single day for at least the last 6 months, probably. This hasn't always been a daily practice. When we started the podcast, really, the podcast was so much in its infancy. I just wanted to start a podcast. I had no idea at that point it would ever become what it is today. I had no idea at that point it would ever become anything, honestly. And so we've stayed committed, and by we I mean all of us, you and me. Yep, just you and me. We've stayed committed through this time to being real, to being real time, to coming at you as we develop and grow what this will become. And we're all doing that together. And I think that's so much the beauty of this story. Inevitably, it's a daily journal, and sometimes it takes weird turns, and sometimes it makes no sense. But I think more than anything, it's true. And it's me. And you, and that's it. So we're going to ground ourselves in our greatness. This is a practice that I developed from one of my coaching experiences, and it had such a major impact on the life of those athletes that felt like it would be remiss to not bring it here, right? To not use that because of what I saw that do with that group. And so, greatness grounding. Let's go for it. If you want to read more on greatness grounding, you can go to nussinc.com. That's where you'll find the blog, and there is a longer form explanation of what greatness grounding is and where it comes from. So, my great thing from yesterday, I think, was just, again, that presence, that moment, that feeling of, and I think a lot of it comes from saying no to things, because I used to not say no, not be true. Like, I would be so busy trying to save myself for the funnest thing that I could sign up for that I would kind of just sprinkle dishonesty throughout every response that I would give. If I'd be invited 3 places, I would just not commit to any one until I kind of weighed which one was going to be the funnest. I know, I sound like a really awesome friend to have. I'm just saying, I don't know how I have any left. Okay, so I would just wait it out, right? And now I've just gotten better committed to the telling of the whole story and owning where I'm at and what I'm doing for the good of not only myself, for the good of my friends and my family, but also for the good of my presence, because it doesn't just impact my ability to be there, right? It really impacts my ability to not be looking for, like, getting on social media and seeing if the other events that I had been invited to were better, or getting on, getting in my text messages and making sure that no one kind of connects all the dots that I went to this thing instead of that thing, because, I had inevitably lied to people for my reason for not being somewhere. So I think having to stay conscious of all of those dots and make sure that nothing ever overcrossed really stole my ability to show up in those places as true. And I think my Enneagram work has been super helpful and impactful in the way that I navigate this world, in the way that I see those, we can call them weaknesses, But I see that happening. I see myself showing up there and doing those things, and good, bad, or otherwise, this is who I am. This is how I show up in the world. And so we either start to kind of reckon with that, or we start to call true to what that is and how I'm showing up and why, and start calling myself out in those moments, right? Like, no, which one are you doing? Okay, now tell the other person that you're doing that thing, and maybe you can do something later or another day, but be true, right? Because my honest instinct would be to sign up for the one that looks the coolest, and then if it wasn't that cool, or the other one looked more interesting, or someone figured out that I wasn't telling the truth or whatever, then ditch out on the other one, stay there for as short amount of time as possible, then get to the other one, and then spend a very short amount of time there, and then maybe try to grab one more thing if neither of those things shook out. And gosh, even just explaining that, it kind of takes my breath away. That's a lot of energy. That's a lot of thought and working of just navigating something you're supposed to be enjoying, right? Like something that is supposed to bring you joy, hanging out and socializing. Think of how I turn that so rapidly into a very unenjoyable experience for me. And that really became the problem. That stole so much joy out of most things for me. So it was like this never-ending pursuit of enjoyment without ever being able to actually experience that. And that's so dangerous, and that's such a scary way to navigate life, because you don't navigate life. You can't, right? And that was me. And this weekend, I really sat with that reality, with the fact that that's what I try to do, that I just try to have the best experience possible, and I am constantly weighing things against other things and navigating with little white lies is what I would call them. But that steals my own truth, right? That steals my ability to be anywhere. So I'm working on it, recovering addict of FOMO, okay? Fear of missing out. I don't want to miss out on anything. So if I get invited anywhere, I'm going to be trolling, making sure that I'm not missing out, that I shouldn't have been invited to this thing, that what? And it's exhausting. So working on that. My great thing was doing a better job navigating that, doing a better job of calling myself out when I went to that place, and I haven't always been in that mental space to do that. So I'm just saying, we're all working on something, right? And this inevitably is one of my great challenges in life. So go ahead and recognize yourself for your great thing. You don't have to go into the depth that I just went into, but the deeper that you go in this work, I think the stronger impact it will have on your life. But really, just this practice of recognizing yourself as great changes your perspective, right? Because it takes away this idea that you're flawed, that you don't belong here, that you do not do great things. It forces you to acknowledge and look for great things in your everyday, and how that transforms you over time really is you start to look at yourself from a completely different place. Right? Crazy. So go ahead and take time to do that. Go ahead and recognize it. Go. Do it. You got this. Okay, so do it. That's all. Write it, say it, shout it, whatever you got to do. Just start recognizing yourself. Okay? So, my lights just turned off. Oh, hey, YouTube and all the things. Come on. Okay, so today I want to talk about unbecoming and the unbecoming of myself and this like drastic realization that I had. I would say, you know what, it's August now, and I probably had this realization about February, March. I would say that was the biggest hit. Now I've been working on finding myself, but I would say February, March was really the final awakening of like, sister, you got it wrong. You got it wrong. And so over the last year or so, you've heard me show up every day and talk through what I could do, what I wanted to do, who I wanted to be in this world. And that's been a daily recount of my life and how I started showing up for the things that I wanted to do versus the things that I had been told. And really, it's a story of me showing up and deciding to live life on my terms. And those terms look like writing and speaking and podcasting and doing this type of work. And I thought for a really long time, I had believed and been told that you have to have privilege. And I believe that with all things, right, that were going to lead to success, you had to have some sort of written lineage to do this sort of thing, or to produce the results that you're looking for that give you the ability to do something like this. And I kind of set out to prove that wrong, right? To just start showing up, to prove that you could out-hustle the system, to prove that you could do all of these things, and more than anything, to prove to myself that you have the ability to show up and live life on terms that you set for your life. And that's what I was trying to prove to myself. This is what I want to do. If I could pick anything in this world, this is where I would plant my flag, and I'm going to just start doing that work. And over that course of time, I didn't intentionally set out to discover anything about myself. It really was just like, I pretty much know who I am and how I show up in this world, and I just want to podcast, and I want to speak, and I want to do these things. And those were the dreams, right? Those were the goals that I had kind of set for myself. And those are the things that I still write down in my notebook every day. But I didn't realize that I would start telling a story and that the death of a dream would evolve in this way. And I really didn't expect, as I dove further into this work, as I tried to create dimension and depth to this podcast, to this work, when I really started to dive in and look at the involvement of what this would become, I would find myself. And I think the biggest shock was that I was showing up so untrue in this world. And the last year has really been me realizing that in real time and trying to figure out where that came from and where I went wrong and why I showed up in this way and how I got here. And all of those journeys really led me to this place in February, March, and I had gotten the ability to read more, to dive into the self-discovery work more, and to really sit in silence. And it coincided with right around the time of lockdowns, and the world really was turned upside down, and there was silence. And in that silence, I was able to dive further into the work than I would have been able to otherwise. And there really wasn't anything that could distract me from this work. And so that light bulb moment was the moment that I realized that I had to unbecome all the things that I had become over my life, right? And this wasn't as much a personal journey, although it gravely impacted how I show up in my relationships, and on that personal side, it did have an impact, right? But really from a professional side, I think more than anything, I had been told that you have to just chase money and that really is the most important thing, and that should be your true north, because that's the only reason that you exist here, is to make money and the most of it that you can. And while money is right, money isn't evil, what money does to people is evil. And I think when it becomes that true north, when it becomes the only thing that's driving you, as I watched so many of my influencers growing up, right? My parents, my grandparents, people around me that would have influenced my own moves, as I watched it control everything that they did, it really became this idea that I was to grow up and do the same things. Now, that is what was described to me as success, money. And when I started to remove the layers of what that was, when I started to remove the confining space that put me in, I realized what was important to me and what wasn't. And while money obviously decides whether or not we eat tomorrow, and so it's vital, I just knew that wasn't a driver for me. That would be a result of work that I put in eventually. It just couldn't be it for me, and it never was going to be. And so when I started to remove that and unpack that, this is when I realized that was kind of blindly calling me into this space that I had driven myself to. And as that was the one focus, the one driver, the one thing that I was supposed to focus on getting, that had shifted this idea of who I was allowed to show up as in this world, and who I wanted to show up as, who I was truly called to show up as, which is the Enneagram 7, which is someone who craves freedom and creativity and impact and passion and those things. I wanted to show up as that person, but I had this money idea driven into me for so long that I realized that this creative side of me really couldn't exist if the measure was money, right? There was no way to be successful in how I had sculpted my world around me, in how people had helped me to sculpt this world. There was no way to be successful showing up as my true self. And so the only way for me to find success really was forcing myself into my stress zone. And I had become really good at keeping myself there. Really good. And I had realized that only when I'm forced into these hyper active states of being, only when I had self-forced myself there, that only then was I seen and deemed successful in the world as it was sculpted around me. And so that's where I would have to get. I would have to even push myself into unhealthy instances of self in order to deliver in this world. And around February, March, when I started to have this awakening, I just realized that life was never going to be the same. that I couldn't continue to force myself to act in this state that felt so unnatural for me. And the realizing that it was unnatural for me to be showing up in this world in this way really started to write the unbecoming story. And I'm still recovering and discovering myself. And I went out a bike ride with a friend this weekend, and it was like, I'm explaining this to her, and I'm just like, I'm still learning. I'm still learning how this person exists in this world. And what a strange realization, what a strange movement to have right now at this point in my life, to be rediscovering myself and how I'm supposed to show up. How strange, right? And yet, that's what we're talking about. That's really where I'm at in this journey, is like, okay, if we turned all the tables upside down, if we refound ourselves, if we stripped it all away, who are you and how do you want to show up? And if you get to decide, then maybe we just need enough space to decide, right? And maybe we need to create new experiences that coincide with who I wanted to be. And so that's inevitably what we've been doing since I left my full-time job to pursue this work and to pursue and navigate what entrepreneurship looks like for me. And that's not a cover-all, right? There are people who exist in this world who can't, who that freedom is exhausting, and that freedom would be super scary, and they wouldn't be able to trust themselves. And there are just all sorts of people in this world. So don't think, oh, she does what everyone would want to do. This is super cool. That's what I want to do. And yet, if this is what you want to do, then by all means, go. Okay? But I think today, as I look wholly at the entire picture of where we've come from, where we are now, I think today it's this realization that I'm only in the infancy of understanding who I am and how I show up. And so I have to continue to compile experiences as we keep going through this. As we keep discovering, yup, this is for me. Nope, not for me at all. Keep moving. And that's why I'm saying, I think entrepreneurship and being your own boss is it's in such a fetch mode right now. Yeah, I just used the word fetch. Shout out Gossip Girl, okay? It's so fetch. And it takes a very specific kind of person to be able to show up in that world. And I don't even know that I'll stay here forever, right? This is what I wanted to do. This is how I envision it. This is where we go from here. But I don't know what we'll continue to discover and learn about ourselves. And I think that's the importance of continuing that self-work all the time. And it's deemed self-help, but it just should be named something else, because that's so threatening and kind of demeaning of what the work is. Because you're forever I think it should just be termed self-discovery, because self-help inevitably, right, it instantly terms you needing help. And we all need help. But that's such a demeaning word to put on it, because it makes it seem like it's, work, which it is, but I don't know. I don't even know what I'm saying. I'm just saying we should all be continuing to grow and question how we're showing up in this world. And that's why the unbecoming of me happened. It was like I had been calling on myself for the last year to decide what my terms were even going to be, what I wanted to do, how I wanted to leave my mark in this world, what it was going to look like through the lens of myself, and how I was going to discover and develop that person. And over the course of that work, over that time, I started to discover that I wasn't really showing up as anything that I wanted to be. I was showing up as what I believed I was allowed to show up as. And so it had kind of this two-part discovery process of, these dreams aren't really mine. I don't even know what these are. I'm kind of just waiting around for someone to acknowledge that I'm good instead of acknowledging that of myself, and hope that they'll assign me something new to do and be. Okay? So we got to undo that. So then this next portion is like, who am I? How do I naturally navigate this world? Because it's not natural to force yourself to operate at such a high volume pace that you can't actually sit with your thoughts, that you are actually forcing yourself to operate at that pace, so you have no thoughts. So you have no ability to actually think, because the second that you lay down and think, you will have thoughts that overwhelm and scare you. And you'll never be able to think straight anytime that you do have time, because you're constantly trying to process all of the things that you have going on. And so you will inevitably never have any downtime. And that was me. And that was a forced and continual ask. That's what I would ask my bosses. That's what I would ask people who are in charge of me. Like, it's just better if Hanna has no thoughts. So go ahead and load my time and my schedule up so much that I have no ability to sink back into my own brain, because my own brain scares me. And I think the reason that it scared me is because it really, anytime that I would allow myself to sit with it, it would start questioning itself. It would start questioning the world and how we showed up and what I wanted to do. And it would start questioning if I was even really showing up as myself. And I can tell you, the scariest thing was sitting with those thoughts finally. And I had to pull back from a lot of things, and it didn't make sense to people, because all of the people in my life, by and large, would go, "You have a great life. This is amazing. These are things that you've always wanted to do. What's the issue? Why are you stopping? What's going on?" Right? And they always think that it's something deeper. And I'm just like, I don't know. Just give me time to breathe. I get it. I get what it looks like to you, but to me, it looks like a mess. To me, it looks like me not being able to show up for anyone but everyone else. And I don't know that I care about everyone else anymore. I don't know that everyone else should be more important than my own family, than myself, than my husband, than my children. I don't know that that's the life that I want to live. I don't know that I want to keep putting everyone else in front of that. I don't know that I want to spend all of my time, thoughts, and energy in how I help impact you and your children, right? And once I started, I don't think that it was a question of whether or not I wanted to impact people. It was a question of whether or not I wanted to keep putting everything else aside in order to do that. Right? Everything that in my true stripped down value mattered, I don't know that I wanted to keep sidelining that. And so that was the biggest realization that I would have. And it took me removing myself from all of those instances in order to really sit and think about what it was that I even wanted. And we're still in the midst of that work. And I don't know how it's all going to turn out. It's a continued story. As always, you're smart, you're strong, you're beautiful. What are you going to do? Change the world. Let's end the live.